January the 27th, 2011. The PlayStation Meeting Conference, Japan. Sony officially announced the PlayStation Vita, a unit designed to deliver PS3 quality games in a handheld. The device was supposed to close the gap in mobile gaming and home consoles. Much was promised, and in all fairness, to begin with anyway, a good amount of that was delivered. The handheld was released in February 2012 with a relatively successful launch, selling over 300,000 units in Japan and 200,000 units in North America in its opening week. That is pretty much where the success begins and ends for the console. Week 2 sales saw a 78% decrease compared to week 1, and Sony's year 1 target of 16 million units to be sold was adjusted to 10 million units by the end of month 1. By the end of 2012, Sony stopped reporting sales figures for the Vita altogether, with the first year sales figures estimated to be around 4 million units sold, some 6 million units short of what Sony's year 1 target was set at. By the end of year 2, it was estimated that 6 million units had been sold in total. So, what went wrong for the Vita? Why did it fail? Let's talk about it. The undisputed killing blow for the Vita was the decision from Sony to implement proprietary memory cards. This decision can only be described as arrogant at best. In short, if you wanted to install games, save game progress, or download games, then you would have to buy a PlayStation Vita memory card. At first, it doesn't seem all that bad until you see that a 32GB memory card would cost you in the region of $100. At the same time, a standard 32GB SD card was priced around $18. Sony clearly gambled on the fact that this would be an afterthought for consumers who would be forced into buying the memory cards once they had purchased the Vita console. It was later revealed that almost the entire profit margin for the Vita was based upon sales of these memory cards. Clearly, Sony were naive enough to think people wouldn't pick up on this and that gaming media outlets wouldn't report on it. The damage was done from day one. Yes, future versions of the Vita contained built-in storage, but this was far too little too late to save the handheld. Something as simple as how you save your games caused catastrophic damage. The lifeblood of any console is its games. If you don't have the games to deliver, then why on earth would anybody part with their hard-earned cash? People buy consoles mainly for one of two reasons. Number 1 is blind loyalty to a brand. Number 2 is I want that console because I need to own that game. The Vita delivered somewhat of a fan service to PlayStation fans at first, with games such as Uncharted: The Golden Abyss, Killzone Mercenaries, Wipeout 2048 and Resistance: Burning Skies. Bar that, there was nothing to appeal to the mass market. Later down the line came Tearaway, which was exceptional, and then after that came the abundance of indie games. Yes, the Vita had a complete switch on games being provided by just showcasing indie games. All it did was kept current owners ticking over with new content. There was no AAA titles to force people to buy a Vita. It was pretty evident by 2013 that Sony had called quits on developing AAA games for the console. If the memory card fiasco was the gun, then a lack of game support was absolutely the bullet. The predecessor to the Vita, the PlayStation Portable, is still the 8th best-selling game console of all time. It sold more units than the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo Entertainment System, and was narrowly beaten to 7th spot by the PlayStation 3. Sony's portable games division had an incredible user base to take advantage of. All they had to do was deliver with the Vita. The Vita launched alongside its main competition, the Nintendo 3DS. The 3DS went on to sell 72 million units. The Vita was far more advanced, was priced at the same level at launch as the 3DS. Simply put, Sony had a head start on Nintendo with the Vita, but failed to take advantage of it. In the end, Nintendo reacted to the poor sales of the DS by slashing the price and making the product more appealing to the mass market. They followed that up with solid AAA games which again would appeal to the mass market, but also Nintendo fans. There was no reason for anybody to consider the Vita as a viable handheld option. Sony failed to react to what the competition was doing, and in a marketplace where you need to be a step ahead, they allowed themselves to stand still. Nintendo continued to improve the 3DS with superior versions and desirable packages. They listened, they took action, and they won. The Vita didn't even try to compete. The now famous reveal of the PlayStation 4 and the announcement that the Vita would now be a second screen for the PlayStation 4, and that is where E3 2013 ended for the Vita. Little over a year from the release of the console, this should have been where the Vita knocked it out of the park. The polar opposite took place. Like an unloved, unwanted child, the Vita was cast aside, with many hopeful fans having to accept that the Vita was now merely an extension of the home-based PlayStation 4. This was the moment Sony lost all potential new support for the Vita. Looking back, it's a really big shame.
Good shot, kid. You got it.
This one is debatable. Lots of people claim that the advancements in phone and tablet gaming killed the need for handheld consoles, and simply put the failure of the Vita down to the successes of mobile phone and tablet gaming. Look, Sony had time, money, talent and technology to make sure that the Vita sat way above that market. The initial reveal was all about how the Vita would be the middle ground between mobile gaming and console gaming. Simply put, Sony failed to deliver on a promise. They failed to keep the Vita relevant in an ever-advancing marketplace. They allowed themselves to offer the same experiences on hardware that was and still is double the price of some tablets. Today, in 2018, we are now seeing full-on console PC games being released on tablets and mobiles. Fortnite, PUBG are the prime examples at the moment. That is today. And if the Vita was released 2 years ago, then I could accept the advancements in mobile and tablet gaming are a direct reason for the failure of the handheld. The Vita was released 6 years ago. At that time, this argument was not applicable. The recent announcement that Vita games will no longer be part of the PlayStation Plus Instant Game Collection in 2019 has pretty much sealed the coffin for the Vita. Unfortunately, the powerful handheld was never truly pushed by Sony, shown by a lack of first-party games, a lack of marketing, and bluntly, a sheer lack of ambition to make the unit a success. The Vita is still home to some excellent titles which are well worth checking out. However, to end the long story short, Sony tried to take down the handheld masters that are Nintendo, and they failed. A few alterations would have seen the unit at least compete with the 3DS, however Sony let the opportunity drift away. The tech was there, arguably the games were there, to begin with at least, it just fell by the wayside. A lack of focused direction and of course the ridiculous price of the memory cards all resulted in the failure of the handheld. Sony truly believed that the PlayStation brand was all that was needed, and this proved to be their downfall. In my opinion, the failure of the Vita is down to Sony's arrogance as opposed to the surrounding markets. They had the opportunity to dominate the market and failed to deliver. It's a shame. All we can do now is think what could have been. RIP the PlayStation Vita. So let me know your thoughts on the PlayStation Vita, any games you can recommend, and anything you think should have been done differently in the life cycle of the PlayStation Vita. Sound off in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, subscribe for more content like this and to help the channel to grow. We're trekking on up to that 1K mark, which is pretty awesome. Apart from that, enjoy your gaming. I'm Waterfields1, see you later.